A very official and warm welcome to the 4th issue of Pencils Down, MA Group's monthly kind of chat show webinar hosted by NeueHouse, our friends who have the Members Club and Cultural Home and Hub of Innovation in New York, LA, and soon to be Miami. So each month we bring together leading minds in fashion, innovation, film, photography, art, design, and more disciplines to discuss their latest works, what that means in a broader cultural context. And this morning or this afternoon now, I'm happy to be here with Kristin-Lee Moolman and Thebe Magugu. So a little bit of background on both, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to leave any important details out. So Kristin grew up in an Afrikaans town before the end of apartheid, and her work explores issues like sexuality and segregation without being overly political. Her sculptural imagery, sun-bleached of scorched landscapes. He took his T magazine and worked closely with brands including Burberry and Nike. Nominated by none other than Cindy Sherman, she won a Rudin Prize for Emerging Photographers and recently transitioned into the medium of film. Thebe is a South African luxury fashion designer, also at the heart of South Africa's cultural renaissance. His LVMH award-winning brand is creating clothes that have the power to shift global perceptions of South African identity. Magugu's designs, along with the recent launch of his annual publication, Faculty Press, are presenting a fresh image of his home country, one that is joyful, progressive, and complex. Sleek, forward-looking design intersects with motifs and details that draw from the continent's storied past, evolving present, and exciting imagined futures, providing smart, multifaceted clothes that mirror the inspiring qualities of the people they are made for. So, Kristin, first question. Your imagery aims to depict a real-life utopia that celebrates and uplifts people from across the African continent, giving voice to a diversity of lives in the cultural, socio-political sphere. Feels particularly relevant amidst a diversity and cultural shifts currently disrupting fashion's traditional hierarchies and beauty ideals. Curious, what made you decide to turn the lens on your friends and local community, and how are you deconstructing restrictive definitions of masculinity and femininity?
So the point of origin for, I guess, the desire to create utopias was actually growing up, constantly being assaulted by these Western images of Africa being portrayed as impoverished and uneducated and violent. And, by default, us who live there, the term third world country really encapsulates everything, because it felt like third-rate citizens from third world countries, and that's what you internalize as your definition. But the reality I lived was different. It was vibrant, it was colorful, it was creative, and populated by individuals that were that. So it almost was like an instinctive reaction to just portray imagery that contradicted that. And, without initially being over political, I just wanted to pay homage to these incredible people that I met on a daily basis and, elevate and empower people through imagery. And then over time, I realized that, even if you impact change in a small way, as image makers, we have a responsibility to try and change negative status quos. So it's become something that it's just I want to just share with the world. This is this magical place that I live in with magical people.
I'd like to come, please. We'll give it a few more months. So Magugu, you're quoted in Vogue saying that a lot of people don't know that South Africa actually has the most progressive constitution in the world because it was designed to right the wrongs of the past. This celebratory attitude, which shed lights on our country's social, political, and economic progress, has become one of your hallmarks. Can you describe how you hope to further embrace what's been described as a modern-day rainbow nation through your work?
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here. I like to think of the new constitution in a very metaphoric or very symbolic way, because it's this idea of rewriting and retelling, which has always been a personal and a professional keyword of mine, to include people into my universe who have often been made to feel invisible in the past, and focusing on parts of our history which were relegated to its footnotes. And how I do this is by imagining that my brand is this sort of university, right? And semester after semester, we focus on an often neglected subject matter. So for example, in the past, we've had prosopography, which was autumn, winter 20, which dealt with the women of the Black Sash and how critical they were to the democracies we enjoy today. But this is a story that's often not told. Or Anthropology 1, which was spring, summer 2020, which focused on the very overlooked town of Kimberley, Galeshewe, where I'm from. And it's a place which is often not even included in some of the most updated of maps. And then my recent collection, which was Alchemy, which explores the changing face of African spirituality. And I think it's critical to spotlight these stories to give a correct sort of apt account of what it's actually like, working in modern day South Africa, and not this sort of dreamt up one-dimensional mood body version of it.
Nicely put, although I do love a mood board. So Kristin, as we were prepping, you kind of revealed the point at which you realized film was a medium you wanted to explore alongside photography. And then we really went down a rabbit hole with that. But would you like to share a little bit about that? Because I thought it was very interesting.
So film is something that's I've always wanted to do, and it's been almost like films have been the inspiration for a lot of the way I create characters in my still images. But it always, like, creating a film in the true sense of the word, screenplays, dialogue, everything like that, always felt like this kind of like unscalable mountain. And I love playing video games, but there's this game called Control, and there was a sequence called the Ashtray Maze, but it was just such a dramatic shift in tone that, like, there was this boom moment in my mind, and sonically and visually it was like this portal just opened up, and it's like I saw this whole new world of opportunities to create like new worlds, and also just to give this voice to my silent images. And it was at that point that I realized I cannot only shoot stills because there's so much more to be shown. So it's kind of nerdy, but there it is.
No, I love it. And, I think it's just interesting that a narrative through one medium can inspire you to use another medium, but, with similarities between the two. Thebe, I'm curious about this too. How did you two meet and start working together?
I think the South African creative scene is very small, so I think we're bound to run into one another at some point. But how we actually started working together was actually by chance. I was working on a collection, and I was supposed to shoot it with a photographer, but that photographer pulled out day before, and it was incredibly stressful. But I had a mutual friend of Chris and I's there, Ibrahim Kamara, who was styling the collection. And he remembered that Kristin had just landed in the country, I think that hour. And I remember we called her and said, we're booking your flight to Kimberley where we're shooting in the next hour. And yeah, that's really how we started working together. And I think this is our third collaborative effort together. And I was just thinking about it the other day. I think it's very interesting because when Kristin and I's universes come together, I think there are parts that sink in quite nicely, but then there are other parts that I think fight one another in a lot of ways. But I think that's where the tension and the interest sort of, comes in, because with Alchemy, the collection about African, on my side was about African spirituality, but in her world, like these traditional healers, have machetes and have these quippy one-liners, so it all feels quite new. It's very interesting, that collide.
Yeah, it's just mind-blowing, actually, your sort of collective creative impact. Kristin, back to you. You perceive that Westerns romanticized and reclaimed that period of American history. In your work, how does your film create heroes and mythologies around South African women of all race and all sexualities, an intersectional view? And how are you reclaiming African history?
I mean, I think to say I'm reclaiming African history is very bold. I never set out to make political statements. But, it was actually a real learning process for me writing the script, because I realized I'd internalized a lot of these sort of like male-driven cinema tropes regarding women. And I just wanted to write these characters where women have their own agencies and the freedom to be heroes or anti-heroes if they wanted to, without having to conform to these male sort of like driven tropes of women always need a reason to be powerful. They need to have been raped. They need to have their families murdered. They need to have lost something. They can never just be powerful, because we are powerful. No one ever shows us as powerful from the beginning. So I just wanted to allow them, the same level of badassery as a male character counterpart would be, free from morality. So yeah.
No, nicely answered. Yeah, badass is definitely an adjective I would use to describe your female characters.
Yeah.
Magugu, there's a Western understanding of African design tropes like beadwork, animal patterns, and tribal references. It's been said that your work deviates from these narrow expectations, providing a new aesthetic and context. But I know that you have an interesting point of view about that. Your perspective.
I actually, in a lot of ways, feel like, ironically, my work leans more into those tropes than necessarily deviates away from it. I think it explores them, and sometimes even explodes them in a lot of ways, because at the end of the day, I am a Black African designer who's using my culture and heritage to tell the stories that I tell. I'm from the Basotho tribe, and it's a tribe best known for two things: their storytelling and their handiwork, and a lot of their beadwork. And I like to think I continue that heritage, just in a way that accounts for my globalized worldview. And with that being said, I think it is really important that things modernize and culture and tradition modernize. Otherwise, it runs the risk of being forgotten in a lot of ways. And I can give an example with how I try and do that in my work. So, as I said before, I'm from the Basotho culture, and from our culture, we all have these sort of blankets that we wear a lot, with a very interesting print on it, like these thick woolen blankets. But that hinders my day to day in a lot of ways. I can't be functional when having constantly having a blanket on. So I took that heritage print, and I had it woven in a cotton jacquard, and I made that into a poncho, which I now wear every day, so I can show off my culture and my heritage, but in a way that sort of sinks in with the sort of my functioning day-to-day life.
Yeah, I love it. My post-pandemic goal is to try and wear clothes that are as similar to pajamas and a blanket.
Us all.
All right, next question. This one is also for you, Magugu. To create Faculty Press, the truly incredible publication that you put together, and you and I discussed in prepping just exactly how many skill sets go into that. You joined forces with editors Lalo Mislani and Amy Zama, and art directors AB and Claire Meikle. Together, you created this kind of take on a yearbook spotlighting the who's who of South African youth culture. How have you explored gender, identity, feminism, and LGBTQ rights through the publication? And second question, how has this been received by the fashion and creative industries?
So like, as I said before, if the brand is this sort of institution or this university, I wanted Faculty Press to almost be like its annual yearbook in a lot of ways, sort of like a working document that captures key ideas and moments and thoughts from people who are really moving the needle when it comes to their work, especially how it sort of correlates with their African roots. And the people involved in Faculty Press or spotlighted in Faculty Press go across the industries. It's fashion design, it's photography, it's literature, it's art, it's film. And what I love about Faculty Press is that there's a lot of questions posed, I think, also to the idea of culture. A lot of things are cross-referenced and a lot of things are rejected altogether as well. And, just as an example, one of the photo series in the first issue, which was themed African studies, told through photography the story of the Bible, which is something I certainly grew up on and which is very typical for a lot of Black families in South Africa. But the subjects of each of these characters in the Bible were queer bodies, who are often seen as like the antichrist figures in conservative and patriarchal communities. And I love that Faculty Press is a space to really explore and question all that. And to answer your second question about its reception, it was received quite well. I think one of the comments that I'll never forget, that was very special to me, was someone, I think it was in London, had said that they simply had no idea about the creative landscape and our creative landscape and what that looks like until they experienced it in the zine. So it was an incredible launch, and I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, we discussed a little bit as well about Afropedia, which is a sort of version of Wikipedia online, incubated by the New Museum, New Ink Incubator. And that is a showcase of just amazing South African or African talents across sort of all areas of creativity.
I think documentation of any kind is super critical. I always say it's really important so that nothing's forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. And also accessible as well. I mean, a lot of people don't know what they don't know because it's just not. Yeah. Okay, Kristin, your turn. We have 9 minutes, and unfortunately, the Q&A function is disabled on this webinar. But if people do have questions, if you could email them to louisa@maworldgroup.com, and I'll have a quick check to see what comes through. But I have a couple anyway.
I'll be glad to answer anything.
Kristin, your recent collaborations with Magugu on a fashion film deconstruct notions of femininity in a film whose title I can't pronounce, so I'll let you pronounce it, but it translates as Ultimate Midnight Angels. Trust me, I did try and pronounce it.
You did.
Steve advised me just not to. Inspired by 1970s B movies, ranging from spaghetti westerns to Japanese pink films with these machete-wielding girl gangs that we aforementioned, busted noses and a love affair between two members of rival tribes. I mean, it's just intoxicating. How did you both land on this as a direction? And has it prompted political conversation or intrigue, even though I know you don't intend your work to be overly political? It is.
Well, so our previous collaboration, Counter Surveillance, I think for both of us was just such a moment where we realized like there's this whole, like I said before, you know, there's this whole new world that films had opened up to. And then the spirituality of alchemy was the jump off point for writing the screenplay, where, you know, these powerful modern women exist in a morally ambiguous way alongside this world of spirituality, which, like Thebe said, really mirrors reality. You know, you have spiritual healers who like are amazing hairstylists, and it's just a calling, you know. And in the same way, I mean, I discussed the women and their own agency before, but I wanted to, you know, equalize same-sex relationships and heterosexual relationships where it wasn't about the narrative wasn't about the same-sex relationship. The downfall wasn't because of the same-sex relationship. It was just these female characters that happened to be queer. So you could have swapped out straight characters, because the only way to true equality is through normalizing these things, you know, not trying to create a call to action or to elicit sympathy or pity, because if you pity someone, you look down on them. So it was just about, you know, this empowerment and creating this new world where women can be themselves and be powerful regardless of everything. And one of the things that actually was really special that someone said was, and he was Nigerian and queer, and he said like he was so happy that same-sex relationships had been portrayed in this way from, you know, in an African context, from Africa, portrayed that way. And that was really special to me because it was exactly what Thebe and I, one of the things we set out to do. So yeah, that was just, it was really great that people got a lot of what we were trying to say.
Yeah, and there wasn't any sort of, just to go on the last, the question about whether it prompted a political conversation or intrigue, there was no sort of backlash in any sort of way, even, you know, from the more conservative sort of facets of where we are. And I think that just goes to show you how powerful, I think, image making and filmmaking, what powerful mediums there are to just, you know, introduce an idea to someone, and for it to become their new reality, you only need to see something once until it sort of, how do I say, just becomes normalized, if that makes sense.
Does, yeah. I mean, from my point of view, aside from the fact that it was very entertaining, intriguing, fabulous, I mean, the cinematography and the fashion design, the clothes, the characters, it was very, very special. But it prompted me to go and do research on South African history. And, you know, I spent a few hours just fascinated. So I think if you're giving people kind of that call to action in a way, that's very important work. But it's also very entertaining, everyone. So all right, we have 4 minutes, so we've timed this perfectly.
Yeah, wow. That is perfect timing.
So I'm going to ask, what's next for both of you, starting with you, Kristin?
So, because filmmaking has become like a drug for me, I'm currently working on a new screenplay. It's set in Limpopo, same 4 lead actresses as my previous one. And it's sort of, from genre point of view, it's somewhere between a Western and a crime drama. But I'm learning how to play the electric guitar because I like a challenge, but also I want to do the score for this. So, you know, riffing on traditional music from that area and creating something new, distorting it out, and then scoring this film about these badass South African bitches. So yeah, that's me. Some months of torture await.
I'm very excited, Chris, to see all that come into fruition.
Yeah, me too. What about you, Magugu?
So
Or
I'm
Thebe,
working.
sorry, I'm calling you by your surname, Thebe. We can get familiar. We've had a few Zooms.
So I'm working on quite a few collections, which is always very exciting for me. The beginning of each collection is very exciting because I get to, you know, research and meet people who I interview, who I find completely fascinating. And the most exciting thing with creating a collection is like taking all that text and that theory and translating it into a visual aesthetic. I always get very excited for that part of the process. And then I'm doing quite a few local activations as well, pop-ups and some experiences, because I've been thinking about it quite a bit. And I think whereas a lot of designers start local and then go into a more international space, I think the opposite happened to me for a lot of reasons. So I'm just trying to circle back to my locality and where I'm from and start sort of really anchoring the business. Although the business is based here, I want to anchor it even more by creating really immersive sort of spaces and pop-ups for my local market. So that's where I'm from.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a big topic at the moment. How are people going to be consuming post-pandemic? And what's going to intrigue them to a physical space with all this proliferation of digital media and different ways to consume. Okay, well, in our last minute, I'd like to say thank you so much for jumping on. It's just been a joy and a delight researching your work, getting to know you over the last few days and weeks, and I think we'll continue. If you would, sorry, I'll let you say thank you.
I was just saying thank you for having me. This was really incredible. It's always great chatting. And thanks for joining, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
If you'd like to see more of Kristin's work, you can see it at maworldgroup.com, and there will be an updated version of the site, in theory, going live next week. And Thebe, would you like to finish on your website address?
So my website is thebemagugu.com.
Wonderful.
My name and surname, really.
Good branding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I look forward to receiving any questions at louisa@maworldgroup.com. But for now, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and evening.
Bye.
Bye.